Believe it or not, one of the biggest reasons why adults struggle to progress in the ways in which they want to, whether that be on a professional level or a personal level, is because they struggle with one skill. One skill, and that skill is critical thinking. Now, I know what you might be thinking. I heard that before, and it sounds basic and it sounds elementary. And even though we may have heard about it back then, nobody really taught us how to apply it now. What does that look like now? It's the same way that math was kind of for us. I think a lot of us really, because we'll learn all these different things, we'll have all these different phases in math classes, and we're like, when am I ever going to use this? I'm not going to be no math major. I'm not going for accounting. I'm not going to do none of that. So when will I ever use anything outside of knowing the average of something? Or simple addition, multiplication. You know what I'm saying, the basics. Critical thinking is the same way. And I'm going to tell you how we heard about it as kids, but how we need to apply it as an adult. This video is going to be very basic, bare bones. You're going to be like, okay, but what else? Something seems incomplete here. But it's only going to seem incomplete because I'm going to do this in parts. Like, it's going to seem complicated, but it's really not. I'm going to tell you exactly what you need and how we're going to get there. So join me in the next one, because I want this to be basic and bare bones so you can grasp it a little bit better. But hold on, because I'm going to flip this around, and I'm going to show you what I got up on this whiteboard right here. Okay, now that we know that most adults struggle with critical thinking, let's talk about it. Welcome to Critical Thinking 101. Let's make it a class for adults. Why not? We're going to talk about how we can apply it to our lives now, how this can be useful. Now, in order to figure out how to apply it, we got to understand what it's actually good for, what it's going to help with. So what does critical thinking help with? I'm asking you, like, you here, but it's really me. Just play along, all right? And don't be judging my handwriting either. Just get what you came for. Get the lesson, all right? So it helps with two things. The first one being problem solving, and the next one being decision making. Now, one thing about it, in this lifetime, no matter what you're doing, what angle you're looking at it from, there's always going to be a problem to solve. And in order to solve those problems, a decision always has to be made, right? Critical thinking will help you come up with the best decision to solve the problem. It all works together. But in order to start critically thinking, you must do several things. Several things, okay? But we're going to break this down bit by bit. We're going to do this in parts too, because I want you to really understand. Like I said, each part is going to seem really basic, but I want it to be that way. So that way you could grasp it and really start to apply it in your life. This is a simple formula. Like I said, what I'm about to give you is a simple formula for a professional thing, a personal thing. You got to figure that out. But essentially, all you're going to be doing is plugging in the problem and working around it. We'll touch base on that in a second. But there's a few things that you must do in order to start critically thinking. This first one, y'all already know about for real. Just like y'all know a lot. Y'all know a lot about a lot of this. But I'm making sure you really understand it. The first thing that you must do is ask questions. And I mean a lot of questions. A lot of them. And this is like the main part. The main part. And that's what we're going to touch base on in this first one. Ooh, I'm over here about to tear some stuff up. Hold on now. The next thing you must do is pay attention. Look, sounds simple, right? But a lot of us don't. We miss a lot of steps. Like I said, I work with a lot of people to know that people will miss this step too. It's like you're there, but you ain't really there. So you gotta pull from experience. One of the key things about pulling from experience, though, is that you must leave your biases behind. You cannot take your biases with you when you are critically thinking. Because sometimes a lot of biases that we have, even though they may have been valid in a lot of instances, they actually hold us back from making the best decision possible. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. And the last thing I got down here is You got to learn how to put two and two together. What's one plus one? That equals two, right? You need to connect the dots. Learn how to pull all this information together, but we're just going to say connect the dots. That's simple, right? So, the first part I want to talk about today is asking questions. A lot of them. When was the first time you heard that? The first time somebody ever told me that I needed to ask a lot of questions, I was really young. I had just started school, and I think maybe it came from one of my parents because they didn't want me to go to school and feel like I didn't understand something. When you don't understand something, you have to ask, right? So that's what I was taught. We were all taught that, and we were also taught there's no such thing as a stupid question. Now, listen, I've never really heard an adult say that. Not too much. If it wasn't in a work setting where they were trying to encourage people to do this, I have never heard other adults say there's no such thing as a stupid question. Why? Because at some point we started thinking questions were stupid. And it came from one of two places, if not both. So being in that classroom, you around a bunch of kids. If one of these kids just act a certain way, and they're like, who is this person asking this question? Like, are they slow? Kids are just kids. Sometimes you might not be paying attention to things. Maybe you miss something, and then they make you feel like, didn't she just say that? Are you listening? So you kind of want to dial it back just to get away from that potential embarrassment, right? But more than anything, outside of that, I think the reason why we stopped asking questions really came from our parents. Our parents are our guardians because we would carry that same behavior going home. Ask a bunch of questions. Think about how many little kids that ask, why? Why is this? Why do I have to do this? Why did you say this? And parents, out of frustration because life is hard, I got a million other things to do, you ask me all these questions, it stops becoming different answers that they give you to do it because I said so. That's why. There is no reason. Just because I said so. This is right. This is what it is. Don't come over here asking me a bunch of questions. I done had a long day. I know y'all familiar with that because life get hard. Our parents are people, our guardians are people, they deal with stuff every day. But a lot of what we don't know is that our parents won't answer questions because sometimes they don't have the answer. I'm not trying to put people on blast, but that's the truth. And put yourself in your parents' shoes if you're not already a parent. How would it feel to have a kid asking you all these questions and you the one that brought them into this earth? On this earth, you're supposed to raise them up and teach them everything, but you don't have the answer yourself. What happens? That's a sense of embarrassment, right? So then you tell them to stop asking questions because you don't have the answer. You'd rather them be quiet than tell them that you really don't know. Because then you lose credibility and everything just as a parent. Not for real. That's something you got to heal. That's something y'all got to work through. But that's really how a lot of people's psyche works. Asking questions, the reason why it's important is because it gives you the data that you need. You can't properly problem solve or make a decision if you don't have enough information. And even though it might create a sense of annoyance with people, like you asking all these questions, you gathering data. But I need you to get out of your own way because you don't want to ask these people questions, but a lot of the questions that you're going to be asking are not to other people necessarily. They're really going to be to yourself. You're really going to be assessing what you know, what you've been through, what you've seen, what you read, what you could research. It's a lot. And I'm going to give you a simple example before we end this video of how questions just come to be and how the brain can kind of spitfire them if you allow them to. It's almost like brainstorming, but brainstorming questions, brainstorming hypotheses, all that type of stuff is helping you gather data. And even though some of these questions might not add up to essentially giving you a solve for the problem, you checked off the box. You checked all the boxes. You looked down every alley. You checked every avenue to know that this won't work for me. And that's what you really want to do. And sometimes it takes a little time. Sometimes it don't. If you really give yourself the space to think, sometimes you have to separate yourself and give yourself time to work through this stuff, journal some things. You'll get what you're looking for. You really will. And listen, I got stuff written down for y'all and everything. Let me make sure let me make sure I ain't missing nothing because I want to make sure y'all understand um, how this could be helpful. Okay, so let me give you this example. Y'all gonna laugh when I read this because I'm just gonna start it off with this. I'm not gonna write the whole question. I just want to start it off this way. And I'm gonna say it exactly how my brain is saying it. Alright. If Johnny had 5 apples, y'all know where I'm going with this. If you grew up in a black household, that's how it went down. Y'all went through a math equation so many times in like first, second grade, and you still ain't getting it, and the mom would be like, if he had 5 apples, take away 4. You know how it go. But I'm gonna give you a scenario. Let's say Johnny had 5 apples, and he was bringing home 5 apples for him and his 4 siblings. But Mary had none. What happened to Mary's apple? What happened to her apple? What questions come to mind when you start thinking about Johnny bringing home 5 apples for him and his 4 siblings? What happened to Mary's apple, and why don't she have none? First of all, here's where my brain is going. Who said that Mary was his sibling? Is Mary his sibling or not? Can you confirm that, right? So then you got to determine that. Okay, is Mary his sibling? Boom. All right. Now, what happens to the rest of the apples? Who has apples? That's another question that's coming up. You see what I'm saying? That's 2 questions that just came up. Mary don't have an apple. What's going on with the 5 apples? Now you got to ask, okay, if everybody else got an apple, what happened to that one? Do one of them got 2? Did one of them eat 2? Like, are they greedy? What's up? Or is it being hidden somewhere? You see how many questions are coming out of that? It's because you have to consider all possibilities. Now, what if I told you that Johnny was my cousin? Johnny and Autumn was my cousin, including Mary. And it's like, all right, I know Mary. I like Mary. That's probably my closest cousin, right? This is what I'm touching on right now. I'm pulling from experiences, from me knowing them, me loving them, Mary being my favorite cousin. But you see how this is creating a bias because this is my favorite cousin, right? It could. Mary said she didn't have no apple. What happened to her apple? But because I got that bias, I might be missing the fact that sometimes Mary is a liar. Sometimes she lied. Mary already had that apple, and she took it and she hid it and said she didn't have one. So what happened? Why would she do that? You see how all these different questions come up? That's collecting a bunch of data. And I had to let go of what my experiences were, my love for Mary was, just to see what it really is, to just explore that avenue. That is going to help me figure out what happened to that apple. I might even have to see, like, all right, is they hiding it somewhere? Is it under one of their seats? I don't know. You got to go look. You got to go see. But you test these things out. You figure out what the problem is. You write it out. What's getting in your way? Ask yourself a bunch of questions so you can, one, collect the data. That is your main goal. Ask questions to collect data. When you collect data, you will be able to tie the rest of this in here. Oh, except for Johnny and his apples. You'll be able to tie the rest of this in here, and we'll start to talk about that later on. Like, I know you're looking at, what about pay attention? Like, that seems so simple, but you will not believe how many people don't pay attention because they just be in their own little world. But that's in part 2. But I want you to start off with that equation. In order to progress in my life, in order to get to where I'm trying to go next, whether if that's a promotion, whatever the next stage in a relationship might be, what is really stopping me? What's really stopping me? Ask these questions first. Write them down. Even if it's just a theory, even if you think you're in your head about it, write it down first and let's connect with it. Let's connect on it during the next video.